seen a lot of trends and movements that have blown through the church in my 41 years as a pastor of an evangelical non-denominational church in Southern California. Some of those movements, some of those trends have been theological in nature, others have been cultural. And I have to say, we've dealt with those. We've analyzed whether or not they were biblical. When not, we've taken a stand against them. But these things have come and then they've blown through the church. Some have lasted longer than others. Some last a few months. Others have lasted years. But something fundamentally different happened, I think, during COVID that's lingered a lot longer than many of the trends and movements that we've seen. And I have a suspicion that it may continue on indefinitely. And it's this. Let me give a little bit of background. The lockdowns that happened during COVID were meant to be temporary. You'll remember the phrase that was said at the very beginning to kind of justify them as 2 weeks to flatten the curve. The curve being the rate of infections rising seemingly exponentially there at the very beginning of the COVID epidemic. And so the idea was by hunkering down, by limiting movement, we could put a kibosh on the steepness of that curve, could flatten that curve. And the thought was, if we could do that for just 2 weeks, it would flatten the curve and we could get a handle on the rate of infection. Of course, it didn't last 2 weeks. It lasted for many months. And the mentality of lockdowns and sequestering and masking has continued. I was just out doing some shopping this afternoon, and there were probably a fifth of the people. It's hard to estimate numbers, but I'm going to say a good 20% of the people that I saw were wearing masks out in public. Just went to a acute care facility to visit someone, and everyone there was masked, and not by requirement. They were all masking voluntarily. There were no signs requiring masks. So that the lockdowns were supposed to be temporary. But the reality is, when it comes to church, a lot of people continue to not go to service. They stay home. They are doing nothing. They don't watch services online. They have withdrawn from church altogether. Others, and I know because I've talked with a number of people who they continue to watch services online. For them, it's very much like the same mode they adopted during the COVID lockdowns when churches were streaming. And they continue to stay at home, though they could go back to fellowship. And in talking with so many of these people, they say it's not permanent. They will be coming back to church. When I ask, well, when? The answer is, well, I don't know. I will. Okay, and I will press sometimes, not all the time, but I will press sometimes. What are you waiting for? Under what conditions do you need to get back? And here's their response. I know I should be back now. It just is so hard. And when I say, well, what's hard? They say, going back to church. There isn't any barrier. There is no concern about infection. It's the habit that they have developed of simply staying home because it's easier to get up and turn on TV, and whether they sit and actually watch the service or they're doing something around the house and they've turned up the volume and they're listening, kind of getting, two things done at one time, which we all love doing. For whatever reason, they are not back in fellowship. They say they know they should. They're staying at home and watching online is not permanent. But here's the thing. If you never come back to church, it is permanent. And if you don't come back to church for undefined reasons, there isn't some deadline that you have set for yourself. It becomes this, oh, I don't know. I just watch at home. then nothing's going to change. People need to decide, I need to go back, and then they need to actually go back. Another group that I've talked to that is stuck online are people that have moved away. I live in Southern California, and we have seen quite an exodus of what we would call politically and theologically conservative Christians leaving the state for other states. And as a result of that, we've seen a decline in attendance. We've picked up not a few new people and new families. But if we had added those on to the people that have moved away, we'd probably be up at a couple thousand people at this point. Those that have moved away that continue to watch online, and we know because we see them making comments, they email us and tell us that they're still watching online. And when I encourage them via email to find a church, a local church, their common reaction, their common response is, I can't find one. I've looked, I just can't find a church. And that really bums me out. I think it says something to the state of the health of the church. Listen, how do I say this? I know that I am a capable teacher of the Bible. I know that there are some people who really connect with my style of teaching, and I understand when they move away and they go to a new church, they're going to try to find a pastor, a Bible teacher that's similar to my style because they have been blessed by my teaching, by my ministry. And that's flattering. But being involved in a church, a community of believers that can come around you and support you and help you grow and pray for you and you can pray for, where you can be blessed by their spiritual gifts and you can bless them with your spiritual gifts, where you can grow together, is, quite frankly, it's essential. It's not an option. God never intended for his people to grow spiritually by staying at home and watching church services online. The church is a community. It's not a fragmented, individualistic, consumer-minded entity where we package inspiring messages for the masses. That's not what the church is. The church is a community. It's a family. And the only way that works is if we're present with each other, if we're attending meetings and services, family gatherings, where we can be rubbing shoulders, where we can be communicating face to face. That's absolutely essential. And so I want to encourage, if you are someone who maybe moved away from a church and you're having a hard time finding a church in your community that's like the church that you left, you still need to find a local congregation of believers. Maybe the teaching's not great. Maybe the worship isn't what you would prefer. You need other brothers and sisters in Christ that you can see face to face, not on a screen, that you can share and do life with together. That's absolutely essential. Now, listen, go online, find good teaching. I mean, if you're online for quality teaching, then go find some quality teaching. Don't be limited just to your previous church. For goodness sake, there's some amazing Bible teachers that are online that you can be using to bolster that part of your development, your discipleship. But you need to be committed to a body of believers. If you're shut in, and this is where I think online ministries can really be helpful, there are people who are shut in. They're physically unable to get out of their homes. So yes, use online. I affirm that strongly. At the same time, you need to contact your closest church body that you can connect to, explain to them your needs, that you are getting teaching and worship to whatever degree online, but that you need that personal contact. Find a church that can have some people that can come over to your house, that can be with you and pray with you and share meals together. And to that point, you can have connection. Because again, this is the way we grow spiritually. We do not grow by watching a screen. We do not. You can grow partway. Yes, absolutely. You can learn truths that can impact your life and you can put into practice. But to be a well-rounded, full-orbed, mature Christian, we need one another. There's a passage that was used a lot during the shut-ins as churches began to wake up to the reality that the shut-in was going in a lot longer than it should have for the shutdown. And that something else was afoot, something political, something cultural was happening. It was beyond not just COVID. And it was Hebrews 10:25, forsake not the assembling of yourselves together, as is the manner of some, but all the more as you see that day approaching. Don't know what your view on the end times is. I believe that we are rapidly approaching the end times, capital E, capital T. I think that we're seeing the globe stage being set up for what the Bible foretells as the end times. That is the day that the writer of Hebrews exhorts us to make sure that we are assembling together even more earnestly, being more diligent to that end when we see that day approaching. Now, there were those who heard that verse quoted during the lockdowns, during the shutdowns, and they said, oh, it doesn't refer to that. It most definitely does. If it doesn't refer to the body of Christ not forsaking assembling together, then what does it mean? The words are quite clear, and you can't do this fancy dance around the simple, plain meaning of the text. Do not forsake. Don't give up the assembling of yourselves together. Note this, even back then, at the time that the letter was written, he says, as is the manner of some. Already there were those that were giving up, were forsaking fellowship. The context of the letter to the Hebrews was Jewish Christians, Jewish followers of Jesus that were under pressure to forsake the gospel, to turn their backs on Christ and go back to the law, go back to Moses, go back to Judaism. And there were some that were caving. It becomes clear when you read the 6th chapter of Hebrews. There were some that were giving into that pressure. They were going back. They were falling away. The writer says that even in his day, in that time, there were people already, because of pressure, were giving up on assembling. And the danger there was that by giving up on the assembling, it was going to hurt them spiritually and could eventually lead to them falling away. Online services are great, but they cannot substitute for the face-to-face encounter of believers experiencing the grace of God together, in worship together, celebrating communion together. I want to urge you, I want to encourage you, if you're someone or if you know someone who has yet to return to fellowship, please do. Please share this message with them. It's vital that we be in fellowship, regular fellowship with one another.